Hi, it's Alistair at Electric Scotland. Just doing my weekly newsletter introduction for March 8th, 2019. The first bit I've got for you in the newsletter is I've highlighted an article that says in 2 decades EU Customs Union membership has not delivered clear benefits for any major UK sector. It says there's a difference between what the Customs Union was supposed to achieve in theory and what it's actually achieved in practice. Thanks to historical trade data published by the UK Office for National Statistics in September 2018, we now know the difference is huge. And what I've done is I've given you a link to read it. It's actually a 3-part article, and the link goes to part 1, but as you finish reading part 1 there's a link to part 2, and likewise when you read the end of part 2 there'll be a link to part 3. I read the whole lot. It took me some time, admittedly, but frankly I'm just more convinced than ever we need to just leave under WTO terms and have a clean Brexit. After that we can then negotiate certainly as some kind of free trade deal with them afterwards, but I think we've just got to leave and get on with it basically. I've added a couple of wee comments to that which you can read when you read the newsletter. Okay, so on to the news stories I picked for you this week. Everyday people are reducing poverty, not big government. It says in areas where the government has tried to reduce poverty, the homeless population has actually increased. And so I'm only picking the stories that I think are really interesting and a bit thought-provoking, so I hope you'll follow through and follow up on the stories that I'm featuring. Okay, welding breakthrough at Heriot-Watt to transform manufacturing. I found this to be a really interesting story. It says researchers at Heriot-Watt University have unveiled a welding breakthrough which could have major repercussions for the manufacturing industry. Its ability to weld glass and metal together basically, and other products which up to now you can't really do. So yeah, I think this has phenomenal implications for the future. How Trudeau destroyed his political brand. It says, until recently Justin Trudeau's government in Canada was providing one bright spot for a Western centre-left, which is, at least in English-speaking countries, rather embattled. But it's this current affair that's going on. Certainly in the Canadian press and the news, it's just dominating the headlines and has done for the last couple of weeks. As soon as you walk on, don't care what Trump's doing, what anything's going on in the world, this is the really big story in Canada. And the Conservative Party have asked the Prime Minister to resign. It's going on and on and on. The National Piping Centre, it says you can watch recordings of the Glasgow US and Barrett Association annual invitational piping competition at this link. And if you enjoy solo piping, it's brilliant for sure. St Colmcille, remembering a lesser known saint. Colmcille, meaning the dove of the church in Gaelic, or Columba, was born at Garton in County Donegal in 520 or 521. I don't know, I found it a good historical account, so I'll give you a link to that. Now, there's also another Brexit article that says 82 billion reasons for the EU held back the UK. So, how the UK is a drag on UK prosperity. Again, it's pro-Brexit, it's an article that, but then again, I'm pro-Brexit. The grim reality of life as a pupil in a Scottish school. It's by Harriet Sweetman. It's a winning article from the Scottish Review Young Writer of the Year. It was actually published in the Scotsman newspaper in its entirety. And frankly, I thought it was a really excellent article. Pretty excellent article. Good that we know we've got young writers coming out that can really get you involved in stories. Sweet smell of success for Harris Candle Company. So I'm hoping everyone around the world want to order some candles from this company. I'm always willing to promote good Scottish companies. It says candle and home fragrance company Essence of Harris is celebrating after achieving the prestigious Investors in Young People standard accreditation. So good on them. The trade deal that could kickstart Africa's industrial revolution. The UN estimates that under the AFCFTA, intra-African trade could increase by 52.3% by 2022. So as many of the African countries are in the Commonwealth, that has implications for us, in Canada as well, so we should read it. These 21 photos show the dramatic changing face of the Gorbals in Glasgow. It says few areas of Glasgow have changed so drastically in such a short space of time as the Gorbals did in the late 20th century. So you can have a look at all these great photos they've come up with. The book of Genesis is actually a story about the tech industry. Well, I thought this was rather interesting. It says humankind's obsession with technology and economics can be traced to the first book of the Bible. That's a completely new take on this, so I thought you might be interested in reading it. I certainly enjoyed reading it. Scottish expats need someone to give a damn. It says consideration for expats has been so far down the mix in the Brexit cacophony as to be all but inaudible. This is an article from the Scottish Review, and a very good one too. SNP minister abandons entire devolved benefit to the DWP. So the Scottish Government has quietly abandoned attempts to devolve one of 11 welfare benefits that were due to be handed over by the UK Government. It has emerged. Frankly, you should read that. It's disgusting. It really is. I mean, how on earth they think they can have an independent Scotland when they can't even manage to take on this extra responsibility? It's just a joke. It really is. Landscape photography winners announced. It says Dumbarton-based photographer Alan Donald has won this year's Scottish Landscape Photographer of the Year competition. And you can see 3 of his pictures by following the link. And finally, James Clerk Maxwell, the Scots genius in love with numbers and nature. It says James Clerk Maxwell is the most important physicist you'll probably never heard of, ranking with Newton and Einstein. I might add, if you go on to Electric Scotland and do a search for him, you'll find we've got a very good book about him, good biography. Okay, so that's the news stories. So on to what I've got for Electric Canadian. I will say the main thing I've done this week with Electric Canadian is I've created a magazine's menu items. So now if you look at the menu at the top of the page on Electric Canadian, you'll see magazines. When you click that, you'll go to this section. Basically, I've been adding so many magazines and finding so many magazines that I thought there's so much reading that's available, and some really great reading as well, but I thought I would create a dedicated page and section for this. So that's what I've done. And I'm continuing with some of the reports, like the Canadian Archive reports are up for 1898 now. Canadian Annual Review of Public Affairs has gone up for 1921. The Canadian Horticulturalist, I've got volume 16 up for 1893. Canadian Life and Resources, they put out one volume 9 for 1911. Canadian Law Times, I've added volume 16 for 1896. And I might add that what I've done on the magazine page, because all of these that I'm writing are featured there, I've now given you links to the Internet Archive. I'm always going to store a few of these publications on the site so that not everything is lost. But where possible, I'm now giving you a link to read a lot more that are available on the Internet Archive. So when you're reading the Canadian Law Times and you click on the link underneath it, you'll find that you'll get maybe 1,000 copies of it to have a look at. So, you know, I mean, a lot of resources there. I've also added to that magazine page 2 copies of Rose Belford's Canadian Monthly and National Review. And to give example of the type of articles you can read, I posted up one of them entitled Canada and Her Indian Tribes. And I've given you a link to that particular article. So by reading the article, that's the kind of article you can read by reading these monthly magazines. I also added copies of the Canadian Grocer. It's the only weekly grocery paper published in Canada. And I gave you the issue for October the 3rd, 1913. And also Lumbering in Northern Ontario, an old black and white silent film which you can view. It's one of the Path News ones. And I might add that under the magazine page where I have the Lumberman in Canada, I found actually a whole pile of other publications to do with the lumber industry, which I've given you a link so you can read them on the Internet Archive. And then Canadian Nights, it's being sketches and reminiscences of life and sport in the Rockies, the prairies and the Canadian woods for the Earl of Dunraven. It's published in 1914. And then finally for Electric Canadian, just a wee note to say Her Excellency the Right Honourable Julie Payette, Governor General of Canada, will visit British Columbia from March the 8th to 11th. And during this visit she will make stops in New Westminster, Vancouver, Nanaimo, Victoria and Comox. And I've given you a link so you can read more about her agenda. So if you're in British Columbia and want to see her, that will be a useful reference for you. Now on to Electric Scotland. I've put the Scottish Review up, it's volume 27, with January and April issue for 1896. Best Newfangled Family Tree came in. Actually came in last week, but I'd only just sent out the newsletter when it arrived, so it's been up there for a week. Science fiction and fantasy. I did a wee update on my page to add a couple of new authors for you to consider, basically. I think, as you know, because I spend my life doing history, to relax, I love going completely the opposite end to science fiction and fantasy. That's just the way I like to do things. And I have discovered over the years a couple of new authors which I've been enjoying and following, and I noted I hadn't actually added them to my own list within the book section, so I've now done that and given you links to some more resources for them. Okay, then, A Backward Glance, the story of John Riddle, an Australian pioneer. It's a 1904 publication. Really, it's astonishingly good, this guy. I mean, I think you can be reading inspired by reading about him, to be honest. He's English, but he does have some Scottish roots. But certainly what he did for Australia was just amazing. And he did it all for nothing, really. So whereas most people would want to charge royalties and all kinds of stuff, he just gave it away. Brilliant guy. Elliot Ancestors of New England and Many Points West. I got sent in a large PDF of these ancestors by Mark Elliot, and he also provided a couple of links to further research sites which I've added to our Elliot page. So for Elliot's, that should be a good resource for you. The Black Book of Paisley I now have up. It was by David Murray, published in 1885. The thing is, there's a lot of references to the Black Book of Paisley, but I noticed I hadn't actually got the Black Book of Paisley on the site. So I did a search, found it, and now it's on the site, of course. So if you want to avail yourself of it, it's available. Patrick Fraser Tytler, maybe know he did a 9-volume history of Scotland, really well thought of. But I also found he's done a very interesting 3-volume publication on the worthies of Scotland. And so I've now got these up for you to read. And then for the Americans, Chosen Valley, the story of a pioneer town by Margaret Snyder in 1948, which we've added to our American section. And I've given you a link to that book. Then Letters from a Gentleman in the North of Scotland to his friend in London. I swore I put this up, but I can't find it on the site anywhere. So I can recollect I maybe meant to do it and just didn't do it. So I've now done it. So it's now available for you to read. Fantastic introduction. So I hope you'll enjoy reading that. Charters and Other Writs, illustrating the history of the Royal Borough of Aberdeen, 1171 to 1804. Edited with translations by Peter John Anderson, published in 1890. And then George Buchan. I found another and better biography of him that better explores his work outside Scotland. He's a humanist and reformer, and it's by P. Hume Brown, published in 1890. So having got a lot of new information in that one, I thought I'd add that to his page. And then the story for you this week is about bagpipe music. This article is taken from the January-April 1896 edition of the Scottish Review. I thought it was a pretty interesting discussion about the bagpipes, so I thought I'd just give it to you. So around about half the newsletter it takes up this time around. So I hope you enjoy that. And that's it for this week. So hope you enjoy it, and as always I'll put a link to the actual newsletter where you can get links to all the stories. And as always, love to hear from you. Maybe pass on my link if you're enjoying it to other people so they can also listen in. So have a good weekend when it comes, which won't be long now. Thanks for listening. Bye bye.